How's it, Bruce from ThirstGym.com. Today we're talking about how to make your own powerlifting program. Let's get to it. Okay, before we get started, the first thing to understand here about the powerlifting program that we're gonna create for you and teach you how to make it for yourself is that we're gonna understand that you have the intentions of competing in powerlifting, which is the back squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. They are performed in that order of competition. So you'll do 3 squats, 3 benches, 3 deadlifts. Now I'm not gonna go to the minutia of how you pick your temps. We're just gonna kind of go over the training, and then we can go over the minutia of powerlifting in a separate video. So make sure that you check out for that coming in the future. Now, for creating your training program, there's first things that we got to get to understand first about what you're trying to do. If you're watching this video, you're probably more of a beginner to intermediate, not an advanced powerlifter. So we're gonna keep that context in mind. The next thing that we need to determine is how many days per week are you able to train consistently. So you don't wanna bite off more than you can chew. You don't need to be in the gym 6 days a week. For most people, 3 to 5 days is kind of the sweet spot. And my recommendation is if you think that you can always make the gym 4 days a week, no matter what happens, rain or shine, transportation issues or whatever, you can get there 4 days a week, then that's okay. But if you're like, I don't know if I can always make it 4, but I know I can always make it 3, then you design it for 3. So we're gonna start with 4 days a week because that is the most common number of times that powerlifters, especially the beginner to intermediate, get into the gym to train. So I've got my lovely whiteboard here, and we're gonna start off with that as our initial construct here, is that we're gonna go with 4 times per week. And like I said, this is beginner to intermediate. So the next thing you got to determine is what days you can train. I'm not even going to set that up particular, but you're going to know best what works best for you. You just want to make sure you have enough recovery between training sessions that you can feel your best when you go in the gym. Most people, that's going to be a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, something of those lines. Usually people don't like to train on Sundays or try to avoid the weekends. That's entirely okay. Now, with a 4 day per week, most cases than not, I'm going to recommend for people to do a lower and a upper body split 2 times within that week. Okay, so that's the first portion that you want to get down. Knowing that we got 2 lower and 2 upper body days, then we can go to the next one, knowing that one day is going to be more squat intensive, the other day is going to be more deadlift intensive. Our upper body days are probably going to revolve around the bench press to some degree, but it could even be a variation of that day. So to give you an idea of kind of what I got drawn up here, basically that we're gonna have our squat, our deadlift, and our 2 bench press days. Kind of makes sense that you would want to have one day focused on the squat, the next day you're gonna bench press. The 3rd day you're probably gonna deadlift, and the 4th day you're gonna bench press or some kind of variation. Now, if you want to bench press earlier in the week and then deadlift on the 2nd, and then bench press and deadlift, that's entirely okay. Does not matter, it's what works best for your schedule. Now, when it comes to picking out your sets, your reps, what should you be doing accessory work wise? How much volume should you be accumulating? My first recommendation as a beginner intermediate, you start low and work yourself up. Now I'm gonna use RPE to some degree to try to help you break this down. And essentially that just means how hard it's gonna be on a 1 to 10 scale. Don't worry too much about RPE early on, but I'm gonna use this just so I can give a demonstration purposes. So if we're gonna talk about that squat day being our very first day and you're a beginner to intermediate, my first exercise I'm gonna recommend is going to be the back squat. And you're gonna probably do that from anywhere for 3 to 5 sets early on. So 3 to 5 sets of about 3 to 5 reps early on, okay? So that's gonna basically determine the amount of workload that we're going to do. And then we're gonna make sure that we always leave some reps in the tank. So we're just gonna say an RPE of 7 to 8 early on. And then as we progress, that RPE can then go up to 9 to 10, depending upon what we're trying to peak out of it. Then our next exercise is then going to be a squat variation, okay? A variation that particularly helps you, what you're having issues with. That could be for beginners and intermediates. That could be tempos, that could be pauses, that could be box squats if you have a hard time actually sitting back into your squat a little bit. That could be using a front squat variation or even a safety squat bar variation. That's gonna be determined upon what you need. My recommendation, the more beginner you are, the more new you are to powerlifting, stay closer towards the competition lift so that you can get practice with the barbell. So that might be a tempo, that might be a pause squat, and usually you're gonna do that for probably 2 to 3 sets of about 3 to 8 reps, okay? Now, it's not set in stone, but depending upon what you're doing and how you're doing it, that's gonna be where you're at. And then again, with your RPE, that's gonna go somewhere in the lines of about a 6 to an 8. It's not gonna be all out the time. The goal is technical proficiency here. So if we're looking at our back squat day, essentially, like I said, our sets and our reps, how we're gonna progress our RPE over the course of the training block. We'll get to training blocks in a second. My next main movement is going to be what helps me, or in case you, for your squat, close to this derivative for a couple sets, and the reps are gonna be a little bit higher on average, but the RPE is gonna be lower, okay? We'll talk about accessory work here in a little bit. Essentially, your bench press is gonna look very similar. So if we swap this all out for bench press, my main bench press work, 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 reps, RPE 7 to 8 early on, build up to 9 to 10 in these areas, and then you would find different bench press variations. Again, that could be tempo, that could be long pause work, that could be close grip, that could be a spoto press, that could be a floor press. Really kind of depends upon what you want. You just want to look somewhat like the actual bench press, and then you'll go down to your accessory work. Now, the deadlift is the one where I pivot a little bit. So on the deadlift, the first thing that we want to make sure that we hammer home here is that the deadlift is generally hard to recover from, and we don't need to do as many reps to elicit the response and the training response that we want. So no matter what your deadlift is, you're probably, same thing, gonna do 3 to 5 sets, but you're probably gonna do this of 1 to 5 reps on average. And the same thing, your RPE is probably gonna be somewhere in the 7 to 8 range, and it's gonna build up to that 9 to 10 range over the course of the training block. Your second derivative is gonna be something that helps your deadlift, or it could be a squat variation, okay? And the reason I say or is if you feel that your squat needs work, many people need work on the technical proficiencies, but also the ability of hitting depth. Squat is not very comfortable. Generally, beginners are stronger at deadlift than they are squat. You can squat in this variation as a secondary exercise to get work on it. If your deadlift is much stronger than your squat, that's what I would recommend. So number one, I would recommend a squat. And again, that's gonna be a variation that needs worked on. But if your squat is pretty decent and your deadlift is still good, but it doesn't need, your squat doesn't need as much attention, then you can make this a deadlift variation. And by that, I mean, we're gonna talk about things like RDLs, we're gonna talk about an opposite stance, we're gonna talk about deficit pulls, and we're also gonna talk about like block pulls, okay? Now, this is how I would determine how you're gonna do your deadlift, okay? It's again, not set in stone, but generally lower volume, intensity is gonna stay the same, progress over the course of the training block, and then you're gonna determine whether you need more work on your squat or more work on your deadlift and hammer that home based upon what you need here. Now these variations, your squat variation is gonna be like what we talked about with the squat, in terms of your secondary movement, but on your deadlift, these are actually probably going to depend upon the exercise that you do. So the RDL, I usually recommend probably 8 to 10 reps on these because you can get more time under tension with the eccentrics, which can be beneficial for your glutes and your hamstrings. But if we're talking about doing the opposite stance, then again, you want to make sure you're probably only doing 2 to 3 sets of probably 2 to 5 reps, nothing too crazy here. And same thing with the deficits and the blocks. You want these to be trickled down to where there's not as much volume because the intensity is just inherently going to be a little bit harder with the deadlift. Now, on your secondary bench day, okay, so what I recommend here is that this is going to be, it can be practice work in terms of what you need, or it can be focusing on the competition movement again. Now, we're gonna you're gonna work on the competition movement again, okay, just regular. What I recommend here is doing more volume, okay? So this would be more of a volume intensive day. So you're probably gonna have, again, 3 to 5 sets, but you're probably gonna go more in that 5 to 10 rep range. And then your RPE is actually going to start lower, and it's gonna build up to about a 9 on your RPE at the absolute heaviest over the course of the training block. Your secondary exercise will then probably be something dumbbell related, okay? I don't like to push the barbell too much on the secondary day for beginners and intermediates, so we'll just put dumbbell bench press work, and I will let you determine what you want. That can be incline, that can be flat, that could be decline, that could be even floor press variations, okay? And then that's usually gonna be 2 to 3 sets. Again, same thing, about 8 to 12 reps, okay? So as you can see, we've got our main bench press work determined here, as I've already kind of talked about, but essentially here, volume is going to go up, intensity is going to go down compared to our first day, and then our dumbbell work, this is all more for hypertrophy rather than anything else, okay? So now that we got the main work done, what about accessory work, okay? Now I've talked about this a lot in several different videos, contents of mine. For most beginners, here's how I'm gonna lay it down in terms of what you need. So if you're a beginner and you're talking about your squat, initially you're gonna need overall leg volume, but you're probably gonna need stronger quads, hamstrings, and glutes, okay? Oh, we'll just put posterior chain, okay? Now, I know the glutes and the hamstrings are not primary movers of the squat, but when those are incredibly weak, they limit your ability to sit into your glutes and your hamstrings to make your squat look good and squatty. And usually what happens there is that people aren't training to depth at a young enough age, and the posterior chain gets neglected very hard. Totally normal, but usually that's how you're gonna want to determine how you're gonna do stuff. So to give you some ideas, those can be goblet squats, those could be leg extensions, those could be leg press, okay? And then when we start talking about posterior chain, then we start talking about pull throughs, back extensions, dumbbell RDL variations, and then lunge and split squat variations to be our main kind of how we choose our exercises, okay? So you know what, again, I can't tell you exactly what to pick, but if you're picking something around this, if you're kind of letting these determine what you're picking here, then you're gonna be in a good position to help your squat. Generally with exercises like this, you're gonna want 2 to 4 sets of about 8 to 15 reps on the exercise, okay? There can be variations and differences here. You can go up to 20, you can go as low as 6, but generally if you're in this range of your volume, okay, with these exercises, they're gonna help your squat. Now, on the bench press, it's gonna be very similar, okay? We need to figure out what is the issue with most people's bench press. Now, with the bench press, something I have found is that most people lack tricep work and upper back work, okay? So for beginners and intermediates, what I usually recommend are dips, skull crushers, lots of press downs for just general hypertrophy work, okay? Those would be kind of like my main go-to things for the tricep side of things. And then from the back side, we wanna make sure we're doing face pulls for preventative work. We wanna make sure we're doing dumbbell rows of all different kinds. We wanna make sure we're doing chins and pull-ups, okay? And then we also wanna make sure that we're doing any other kind of lat pull down, anything that falls into that category. So, and really I'm just gonna put rows in general, okay? And same thing, these are probably gonna be 2 to 4 sets of 8 to 15 reps in more cases than not. Now, if you're somebody that is newer to powerlifting, my recommendation is going to focus more on tricep work and then rows and lat pull downs. Don't worry so much about the face pulls and things like that. This is where you're gonna get your most bang for your buck in terms of adding size and building your upper back. The nice thing is that on your bench press, this can be done twice per week on that secondary day, where the first day you might hammer more tricep direct work since you bench press heavier, okay? You're gonna have a little less in terms of recovery. And on your tertiary day or your secondary day, whatever, however you have it laid out, then you're gonna make sure that your back work is actually generally more emphasized there. But I would still make sure you're doing both on both days so you're getting stimulus twice per week to optimize your progress. Now, for the deadlift, last one here, and we'll talk about some actual programming stuff. My marker's kind of dying. So deadlift, generally we're gonna look at posterior chain, okay, as the main area that we need to get work on, okay? So if you're done your deadlift and you're doing some kind of RDL variation, you're kind of check the box there. But my next recommendation would be glute ham raises, okay? You're gonna want some kind of lunge or split squat again, if you can. Reverse hypers are good. Hyper, back extensions are good. We also want to talk about different, I got lunges on there, back extensions, oh, pull throughs was the other one, and pull throughs. Okay, those are all gonna be things that help your deadlift succeed. Now, in terms of the back side, I don't mind seeing athletes put a little bit of back work here. So you can put chins, rows, or even shrugs somewhere in this day for about 2 to 4 sets total for the day, okay? So again, these are gonna kind of fall in the same thing that we've been talking about, 2 to 4 sets, 8 to 15 reps on the majority of these exercises, and then pick a back exercise of choice that you really like or you feel helps your deadlift. That could be more rows, what have you, and then that will help your posterior chain for your deadlift. Okay. And to wrap up this video, now we're gonna talk about progressing over the course of a training program. So I would recommend starting at 12 weeks or essentially 3 months is how you wanna probably look at how you're gonna lay out your training block. You're gonna then divide it into 3 equal blocks of 4. Easiest way to do it, each one being 4 weeks, if that doesn't make sense, okay? And what we are going to do is essentially label them peak, transmutation, and then adapt or accumulation, okay? However you really want to look at it. So what that means, we talked about RPEs earlier. You want your RPE to start lower, get up into the mid, and then your RPE be high, okay? Now, your volume, that means is actually going to be high. Your volume is then going to taper, and then your volume is going to be low in terms of how we're going to assess this. Now, this is gonna look very Western periodization-y, but you can still fluctuate things if you really want to. You're gonna go by feel, but essentially, what we're gonna have here is we're gonna start with the intensity part being high, or I'm sorry, the RP being low and the volume being high. So again, we talked about approximately 25 bar lifts, approximately 25 lifts per day of the main motions, okay? Then here, we're gonna go around 15 to 20 lifts of each one. That's per day total of the main movement that you're doing, okay? And then here, we're gonna go more into the 5 to 10 lifts per day, okay? So this is gonna have things kind of start to peak. So example for this might be on one of your days, you're gonna have 4 sets of 2 at RPE 9. Okay, that's only 8 total lifts. That's between our 5 and 10. The intensity is pretty high. The volume is relatively low. An example here in the second or the middle part, again, we're gonna be aiming for 15 to 20 lifts. So what that might look like is 4 sets of 4 at RPE 8. Okay, and so that's gonna make sure that, again, we're in that area. We're kind of in the lower end. That's probably towards the end. The last week is probably then gonna be like 5 by 3 or something like that at an RPE 8.5. And then here on the high day, just going for the very the highest part of it, might be, and again, it's gonna be 20 to 25. I put around 25, but 20 to 25 is gonna be kind of the sweet spot. You might be doing 5 sets of 5 at RPE, oops, 6. I'm on 7, at RP 7, okay? So it's not gonna be a very hard day, just gonna be a lot of work as you're accumulating, and then you're gonna go over the course of the month, okay? So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can lay out your own training program. Obviously, I'm not going into all the minutia of everything that you should do, but when it comes to laying out your training programs of your main lifts, hopefully that gives you some guidance with some very general block-based approach to improve your lifts. So just remember, start light, work your way up. You can also, if you're a very beginner, probably get PRs on stuff very quickly because you have a young and low training age. Again, if you're more intermediate, that's where these RPEs and stuff will kind of help auto-regulate you to see how you feel. So by the end of the 12 weeks, you're gonna be feeling good. Now your question might be, well, what do I do at the end of the 12 weeks? Do I test? What do I do? My recommendation, above all else, if your weights are increasing and you're hitting PRs over the course of that 12-week block or at the 10, 11, 12th week, towards the end of that whole training cycle that you're kind of laying out, if you're hitting heavier weights and or hitting weights for considerably more reps than you normally would, so let's say hypothetically, normally you start off and your squat is 225 for 5. That's the best you've ever done. And then by week 8, you're hitting 235 for 6, okay? We'll go back to some reps that we were using. We'll say 235 for 5 just to make this math easier. 235 for 5, you're clearly stronger, okay? We know progress is being made. There's no real reason to test anything. Let's say now at week 12, you end up hitting 255 for 2. You are definitely considerably stronger than you were here. I would not go to try to take 275 for 1 and potentially miss it. Okay, now if you are somebody that is a percentage-based person, then I understand if you want to take that because you want to run things off of your percentage. But my recommendation as a beginner intermediate, you should use a training max that's not truly your 1 rep max. And what I mean by that is if you do find a percentage-based program that you like, because I didn't talk about percentages here, I'm not a big percentage guy for beginner to intermediates, because they just fluctuate too much and you can get strong much quicker than you can than the percentage calculators would anticipate if you're doing things correctly. But if you're trying to follow that percentage-based program, what's gonna happen is it's gonna hold you back, and we don't wanna overshoot, okay? So we talked about the training max. Again, let's go back to that example. Let's say I hit that 255 for 2, okay? For me, I would say 250 is gonna be my training max. I like to say what I can get for 3. So we'll hypothetically say 250 is now the training max that we now have set. All my percentages will now go off of that number. Now, if I go for 275 and I miss, and then I take 265 because it's too much and I miss that, and I only get 255 for 1 because I made the jumps to try to take 275 and 255 was the best single I got, then you're probably gonna run off 255 again, but you did a lot of straining for a lot of work off of some easier numbers. And if you're running off that 250, let's just say hypothetically, we want to run 80% off that, so that would be 200, okay, is 80% of my 250 training max. 80% you're probably not going to typically take for a lot of high reps, okay? That's probably going to be a good area to hit 3 to 5 reps. So if I'm hitting 200 for, let's say, 5 sets of 3, that's going to be very doable, okay? But if I don't take a training max, and let's just say I actually run it off of my real training max, or my real max of 275, this percentage then goes higher and the strain becomes higher, okay? So since we're accumulating volume with that, it's gonna be safer, and as you make progress, your training max can then increase as you're making progress. So hopefully that portion of it makes sense as well. Now, if you have any direct questions about how to lay out your first training program, please let me know in the comment section below. I know I threw a lot of information out in this like 20-ish minutes or 15-ish minutes, however long this video ended up being. please feel free to let me know. The key thing here I want you to understand is you want to slow cook early, build up over the course of 12-week periods, give or take. You can do 16, you can do 10. That's ultimately up to you. The big thing I want you to understand about creating your own training programs is that you start slow, you acquire volume early so that you can adjust to the training programs and the volume that's going to get you in shape to handle the heavier weights, but you do need to handle heavier weights over time, so don't feel like that you can't do that. And so over the course of your waves, you should see your weights kind of go up, maybe back step just a little bit, go up, and they're going to zigzag as such so that you can find when each training program basically, or each training block ended, you'll be able to determine where that was, and then that's going to set you up here at the end of your 12 weeks. Okay, that's all I've got for today, for today's video. Like I said, if you got any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to help you out. I know this can be very challenging and very difficult. That's why a lot of people pay people to do this. But I think ultimately something about learning about how to write your own training programs if you want to get good at this, because you'll understand yourself better than any coach can. And ultimately, it's going to help you make auto-regulation decisions, which is like in-day decisions of how you feel for your training. And that's going to ultimately help you be a better and stronger lifter. So thanks again. Again, let me know if you got any questions, and we'll see you back again next week for a new video.